Chauvin, who you likely remember as being convicted of murdering George Floyd, has just been stabbed in prison.
This comes as a huge surprise to no one. According to reports, his injuries are severe, with life-saving measures needed to keep him alive. Lots to discuss here.
First of all, Chauvin is serving his more than 20-year sentence at a medium-security federal prison in Tucson, Arizona. The prison will likely face a lawsuit over this incident, because the 8th Amendment requires that prisons keep their prisoners safe from harm.
You might have heard before, and maybe even on this channel, that the police and government have no legal duty to protect you. This is generally true, but there's an exception when you're in the custody of the government. Once the government assumes control over you, like in a prison, they have a duty to protect you.
Now, not all violence that takes place within the prison's walls is legally the prison's fault. The legal standard requires negligence or some kind of indifference on the part of the prison. Here, Chauvin's attorneys have reportedly been warning prison officials that this would happen, and that he needed to be kept out of the general population for his own safety, which seems to not have happened.
We don't know the facts yet, but it's likely that Chauvin's attorneys will argue that keeping a former cop, and now one of the most hated men in the country, around other prisoners was negligent in and of itself. Overall, Chauvin is straight up not having a good month, as the stabbing comes on the heels of the Supreme Court rejecting his attempt to appeal his murder conviction. Professional hockey player Adam Johnson was killed on the ice after an opponent's skate slashed him in the neck and he bled out right there in the stadium.
The player who hit him, Matt Petgrave, has just been arrested on very controversial charges of manslaughter. Now, this actually happened in the UK, but their versions of manslaughter laws are actually really similar to the US.
First thing to know, the act of causing the death of someone or killing someone isn't always murder. There's a legal hierarchy here. Putting it very, very generally, killing someone intentionally is murder, whereas killing someone unintentionally, but while doing something super negligent, is manslaughter. And then killing someone in a true, complete accident is no crime at all.
Here, prosecutors aren't alleging that Petgrave intentionally killed Johnson, rather that he killed him while acting grossly negligent. In the viral video of this incident, and we'll skip the gruesome aftermath so this post doesn't get censored, Petgrave skates towards Johnson and collides with another player. His left skate then kicks up as he begins to fall and the blade hits Johnson in the neck.
What's interesting here is that people are coming to completely different conclusions after watching the same thing. Many believe this was just an accident, that his leg flung upwards as part of falling down. In fact, Petgrave recently received a standing ovation from fans wanting to show him support.
But many others view the leg raise as an intentional karate kick. This is basically what prosecutors are alleging, that Petgrave was grossly negligent in trying to kick Johnson with the sharp blade of his skate, even if he didn't necessarily want to kick him in the neck and actually kill him.
Many are also pointing to Petgrave's history of penalties and his status as the most penalized player in his league last year.
A woman was getting mugged in a New York City subway station when a bystander intervened and stopped it. Although the woman has referred to the bystander as a hero, he's now getting charged with multiple crimes. So what's going on here?
Well, the problem for the bystander or hero or vigilante, whatever you want to call him, is that he fired 2 warning shots with a firearm to stop the mugger.
Although reports say that he legally purchased the firearm, he did not hold the license to legally carry it in public. So he's been charged with criminal possession of a firearm.
But the bigger problem for him is that warning shots are generally illegal, particularly in crowded areas like subway platforms.
This prohibition on warning shots is controversial, but when you fire a gun out in public, the law generally considers that to be deadly force, because it's capable of causing death, and you can only legally use deadly force in response to an imminent threat of serious injury to yourself or others.
And that deadly force, here a gunshot, must be directed at the threat, not fired elsewhere with the risk of the bullet ricocheting off of something and hitting someone else. Firing a gun in public when this standard isn't met, or when you aren't aiming at an actual threat, can be considered reckless endangerment.
Which is also what this man has been charged with. For now, the man has only been charged. Whether he's guilty of the reckless endangerment charge will be up to a jury, who will look at all the video and all the evidence and decide if these warning shots were truly reckless or if they were warranted under the circumstances.
Finally, as for what the woman thinks about those warning shots, she says he'd have been an even bigger hero if he'd helped her without the gun. And yes, I have a cold and I'm a man, so it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
And me. Showed up to a woman's door and asked her to come to the police station, where they interrogated her under threat of arrest regarding posts that she made on X.
You can pause the video to read the transcript where they discuss the woman's post. But they include things like, just your daily reminder that trans women are men. The police officer repeatedly asks the woman if she thought her posts were offensive, or if they'd caused someone harm or distress, which would be a crime.
Because this happened in the UK, not the US.
This might surprise many Americans, but the UK and many other countries don't have the broad protections for free speech that we have.
In the UK, it's actually a crime to make an online post that is indecent or grossly offensive.
If that sounds vague as hell, you're right. But the crime is prosecuted pretty commonly. For example, this teen was convicted after posting on Facebook, "All soldiers should die and go to hell." And this law student was convicted after posting several racist tweets about a famous soccer player.
Now, in the US, free speech obviously isn't unlimited. You can't yell fire on an airplane, make genuine threats, or incite violence. But the Supreme Court has always been very protective of the First Amendment and only criminalizes speech when it's super extreme.
Put simply, making racist or offensive posts on the internet simply isn't illegal in the US. If it was, 90% of you would be in jail.
Right to jail.
But don't conflate crime with consequences. The First Amendment prevents the government from criminalizing free speech, but does not prevent your employer from punishing you for speech that they find offensive.
If you're all traveling back home after Thanksgiving, try your best to not pull your bare ass out in front of an entire plane and pee in the aisle.
What?
Look.
Sorry, everybody.
Are you serious?
Okay, I gotta go pee.
We blurred that for your own good.
So the woman doesn't actually pee, but she does expose herself to the entire plane. Because she says she had to pee really bad and the flight attendant wouldn't let her. So what's the law here?
Obviously, exposing yourself in public or urinating in public can be a variety of crimes like indecent exposure. But is there a legal exception if you're legit about to piss your pants?
No, not really. There's no statutory exception or any case law that says that you can do this if there's a bathroom emergency.
But if you were to try to fight it, your best bet would probably be the defense of
The
necessity.
necessity defense can be applied to pretty much any crime, and it can work if you're facing a harm you didn't cause. Your only realistic way to avoid the harm is to commit a crime, and the harm caused by your crime isn't worse than the harm you're trying to avoid.
Now, this all sounds silly, but it's worth noting that getting charged with urinating in public can carry severe consequences.
That's because a handful of states consider urinating in public to be a sex crime, and if aggravating factors are present, usually if children are around, then you could find yourself being a registered sex offender.